Hey everyone, it's Ryan Mentz, and in today's video I'm taking a look at Tamron's 24mm and 35mm f2.8 lenses. And these are going to be Tamron's first full-frame prime lenses for the Sony E-mount. So these are a couple of lower priced options at $349 each. And I find that they have excellent sharpness, even in the corners. And what's also nice is they have close focusing capabilities, so they have a 1:2 reproduction ratio, and that means you can get some nice wide-angle macro shots. In my testing, I found that they worked really well with Sony's real-time IAF autofocus tracking. However, if I was focusing on a general object to the next, or if I was using the wide autofocus area, I found that the autofocus would stutter and it felt clunky. Along with that, the autofocus is very noisy with constant clicks coming from the lens. If you want to use these lenses for video, I recommend keeping them on manual focus, or if you do have them on autofocus, have your audio recording done off camera and far away from these noisy lenses. Surprisingly, for a late 2019 lens release, these have external focusing, meaning that the exterior of the lens physically moves with focus changes. Overall, they're plasticky lenses and their lightness furthers that cheap feeling. They also seem a bit large for f2.8 prime lenses. However, these two lenses plus the forthcoming 20mm f2.8, they all have the same exact exterior footprint, so perhaps one or two of the bunch are necessarily large to adopt to whichever one's optics take up the most room inside. 20mm. So I have some photo samples here on the computer. Let's take a closer look at the image quality coming from these two lenses. Let's start off with the 24mm, and in this test I'm taking a look at color fringing, so I'm shooting a high contrast situation with, we have the tree branches up against a bright white sky. Classic, I know. So if we zoom in 1:1, we'll see that there's very little color fringing coming around these tree branches, and that's pretty surprising to see with lower price lenses. Normally you'll see a lot of purple fringing in these kind of situations, so this is at f2.8, so it's wide open and you're still not seeing much. And I shot this series f2.8 through f8, and it does clear up as you go along, but there wasn't much to start with. Really surprising, and it's really good to see. Alright, next up we have the vignette test, and this lens doesn't have too much of it to complain about, and this is at f2.8. You can see there's definitely a bright white spot in the center where the outside edges get a little bit darker, but it's not too bad, and I know a lot of people, myself included, like the vignette coming straight out of the lens. I'm sure if you're doing like architecture or something where you want just flat exposure throughout the image, that's kind of a bane, but these days you can recover those shadow areas so easily and so cleanly that, in my opinion, it's not too much of a big deal anymore if your lens does have a lot of vignetting. But in this case, the 24mm doesn't have too much, so I'll go through f2.8, and then here's 3.2, 3.5, and f4. And by f4, you see that it's really disappearing, so you just have to stop down by a stop and you'll be good to go if you really do care about it. And I'm sure if you're shooting anything like architecture or landscapes and stuff where you don't want the vignetting, just stop down like you normally would for those kind of images anyways, and you don't have anything to complain about. Wait, did I say architectural photography? Okay, hold on a second. Because if you look at this photo, there's definitely a lot of distortion going on. And these are supposed to be straight lines, of course, and I'm sorry it's a brick wall test, but it's the easiest way to see that there is a lot of distortion. So if you do care about the straight lines, you are going to have to keep that in mind, that you're going to come in here and post and have to fix them, which usually requires cropping around the edges. And so if you're shooting landscapes and stuff, it's probably not too noticeable, but do know straight lines, correction in post. Alright, so this is going to be showing the 1:2 reproduction ratio macro capabilities of the lens. And with this photo, my lens hood was literally pressed up against this plant. And so I was using manual focus to get the thorn, but my camera, or the lens, was literally pressing up against this. And so whenever I think about these wide angle macro lenses, the first thing my mind goes to is those frog photos with the environment in the background still. So I'm definitely not that talented to get those kind of photos, but it's just where my mind goes to, where you got your subject in focus, it's really close up, or it's a really small subject, but you still got a very wide background, and so you can really tell, or you can get a sense of place of where your subject is. It's a really cool look. I don't know, if you're watching this video on like a smaller screen, I'm sure you can kind of tell what's going on in the background. The bigger the video gets, the harder it kind of tells, but there's like a stream here and some trees and stuff. But imagine I was really good at this and there was like an insect or like a frog here. That's a really cool look where you can be so close to your subject and still get its environment in the background. Next up, we have some general sample photos, and zooming in 1:1, we got some ice over water here. And you can see it's nice and sharp, and you got a lot of detail. You can see some individual snowflakes and the bubbles and stuff. And it's just a really cool look when you can get this close to your subject while still having a wide angle of view. Because typical macro lenses, they have such a narrow angle of view. You usually get such a blown out background or just a solid color background. It doesn't really place your subjects in an environment. So it's just a different kind of look that you might like, you might not like. Just something different, I think. Here's another close-up photo. And if you zoom in 1:1, you can see all these individual hairs, I guess you would call them, on the plant. And just cool to see things that you don't normally notice with just your eyes. Some more cool macro photos, of course. And just a general landscape shot here. We have my dog Luna here, and she's going to be our test with the real-time IAF with Sony cameras. And as you can see, it gets tack sharp results with this lens. You can see my reflection here in her eye. Just instantly hits the eye, and it's really sharp, really good quality. And she's just constantly moving throughout all this, so right now she wants her ball back, and she's gonna whine and complain to get it, but look how sharp these hairs are. It's really something. Here she's jumping up here, constantly moving around. I had to shoot 1/2000 to make sure she gets sharp. And as you can see, it hits the eye every time. And the next photo is kind of an example of a macro snout photo. But this is shot right up against this next photo. And so as you can see, it didn't have an eye to focus on here, so it just went with the closest thing. And nice and sharp here, but as soon as it got that eye in frame, it just went for it. And so this lens definitely keeps up with the real-time eye autofocus with Sony cameras, which is awesome to see because that is one valuable tool in a photographer's toolkit. Moving on to the 35mm now, we are back to the color fringing test. And I do see that with the 35, there is a little bit more of the purple fringing. But again, for a budget lens, this is pretty good, I think. And so this is wide open at f2.8, and I'll move through the range here up to f8. And I see that by about 6.3, it's almost all the way gone. And by f8, so the landscaper's realm of f8, it's definitely fully disappeared. No color fringing at f8. Looks really solid here. And then we are going with the vignette test. And I do see again that there's a heavier vignette in the 35mm than I saw in the 24mm. So you got this bright white spot in the center here with a lot more vignette on the side, so a lot darker. And that's wide open. There's 3.2, 3.5. And by f4 it's corrected a great amount. So again, you just stop down a bit and you're going to get rid of that vignette. Not sure how much it matters in this day and age. We can correct it with a click, but good to know. And back to the brick wall test. Sorry again, but you can see that the straight lines are fairly straight here. There's a little bit of curve to them, but not much. And unless you need the straightest of straight lines, this is going to be a decent lens for shooting architecture, portraiture, landscape, pretty much anything. Might need a little bit of correction, but definitely not on the level of the 24mm. And some more general sample photos. This is a macro shot of some bark, and it's just really cool seeing nature in different ways. So you might not notice how much character there is in bark, but it's really cool seeing it really up close. Zooming in even more one-to-one, you can see the sharpness. And this is a little bit grainy. It's at ISO 2500, but again, just a cool lens that gives you a wider perspective of things. And here's our macro pine greenery. Would you classify this as pine? I guess I don't know. But evergreen? Evergreen's probably the right word. Nice detail going on with some nice bokeh in the background. You can see that it has a little bit of a cat eye shape, but it's not too bad. It definitely blurs away nicely. Alright, so last up I was kind of doing a corner sharpness test, and I was using a focus point somewhere around this area. I tried to use one at the furthest corner with the Sony camera, but I found that these lenses don't acknowledge the existence of that focus point, so you have to move it in a little bit. Just something to keep in mind, I guess. But going to 1:1, you see that it does have really nice sharpness even at the corners. It doesn't get to like right around here is where things kind of start getting smeary, but that's pretty good for a budget lens. Good solid sharpness performance with both of them. If you want to learn more about these lenses, go ahead and use my links in the description below. Overall, I'd say that these are some noisy boys with some weird autofocusing, but they do have great image sharpness, and the final image quality does look really nice. I like the macro capabilities of it, or the 1:2 reproduction ratio, and I have more videos coming up, so please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.